Hello friends, and welcome back to our jewellery manufacturing plant. Today I'm going to go through our stamping process, also known as pressing or striking process, because in the world of jewellery production, remember that we can either cast or stamp. And in fact, a good 50% of our in-house production to our brand jewellery designers are stamped, particularly, for example, our lockets. So think about flat and domed formed shaped items where the sheet of metal is stamped pressed to form that shape. But also in this room, we also make our bangles, which again is metal rolled into pulled wires. There's jewellery manufacturers out there that may not specialise in stamping and may therefore need to outsource that side of production if they focus more, let's say, on casting. But for us at Thai Design, we've been stamping sterling silver and solid gold metal sheets since my parents started the business, so good 50 years ago, and which is why we say that we manufacture jewellery and giftware or silverware. We've kept all the various stamping dies and presses that we've created over the decades, most of which came from our in-house range. You can see that they're all stored here at a separate facility at my manufacturing plant, and it's really amazing to see all the hundreds of the dies that we've utilized over the years. It's an untapped resource that we're looking forward to dusting off and exploring how we can utilize them to benefit our customers in the future. Stamping can definitely be a better alternative to casting, and we have that long-term skill and capability of it. So I'm here in our large stamping department to share with you and show you how we stamp our jewellery from the very start of the process. So stay tuned to the very end, where I'll also be sharing with you the difference between stamping and casting and why some people prefer this method of jewellery manufacturing. So yes, keep watching and I hope you enjoy. Well, the stamping team are having their lunch at the moment, so we're currently filming because otherwise this room can be a bit loud. So, stamping. Unlike casting, where it's about creating and filling molds to create a wax copy, which is then heated and vacuum cast, I'd like you guys to think of stamping as being a process of mixing and melting fine metal grains, and then sheets being rolled ready to be stamped, such as in the case of disc shapes or pulled wire in the case of, say, bangles. And so today I wanted to explain this process in detail with lots of images and videos, just because we at Thai Design, we quite often get, or we give advice to a lot of customers regarding their jewellery designs that they send us. And it may be, sometimes best to stamp their jewellery instead of casting. And I am a big fan of casting and the capabilities that it holds, but both methods have its own advantages, and it always depends on the design. The first step with stamping starts with the preparation of weighing and mixing the correct metal ratios. And this is really important because we need to ensure that, let's say it's sterling silver, that we have the correct ratio of pure silver and alloys. Or with solid gold, we have customers ordering, from 9 carat all the way through to like 18 carat gold. So this is all done in-house, which means we have the record and full control of the mixed metals. The first step is similar to when we cast, in that we're prepping the metal grains in order to melt it at a high temperature. But in the case of stamping or pressing, we have to melt the metal in a high temperature dish called a crucible, using a really high temperature flame or torch. The liquid, or what we call the molten metal, is then poured into a mold to create an ingot, which basically means the metal block, in order to begin sheet fabrication. We then need to allow time for the ingot to be cooled before the compression process begins. So I'd say the second step is the creation of the metal sheet, once this ingot or metal block is ready. So we need to compress the block and prepare it for the die stamping, and by using rolling mills like the two that we have in this room. Okay, so this is the first rolling mill that we would use, and so this is when the metal block is pretty thick. It will go through this machine first, and then we'll just roll it until we go to the second rolling mill. And so after the first mill, it goes into here, and then the sheet will just go through, in and out, until it gets to the required thickness, ready for pressing or stamping. We've had these rolling mills here for many decades, and it's still in really good condition, to the point that we might even be using them every day. And our staff here will compress the ingot using these machines, using 26 tons of pressure. The sheet gets thinner and thinner, and then it goes in and out of the rolling mill until it gets to the required thickness that we need it to be. It's pre-calculated what the thickness needs to be before it then leaves this room, because remember that each piece will still need to be hand filed and hand polished. So we'll never roll the sheet to the final thickness that the customer wants. It always needs to be slightly thicker. Now, one thing to note is that this initial compression from the rolling mill helps to align the grain structure. So what I mean by that is that within the metal, the compression is pushing out any air that may have come about within the metal when we were pouring the liquid metal into the crucible, if that makes sense. However, to get the sheet to the appropriate thickness, it needs to be softened in order to allow the stamping or pressing die to form its shape, because the shape of the die can't form a perfect shape if the metal is really hard. It's called annealing. So we use what we call a furnace oven to soften the metal sheet, and it can go in and out of the oven a few times so it's ready for pressing or stamping. Or in the case of bangles, in order to pull the wire, it has to have the right softness. Now, we already utilize our 2 furnaces for our casting process, so between the 2 we can take it in turns to use the oven, especially during our busy period. And we don't need to keep them in there for too long, so anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. But yes, it might come back to the rolling mill and then back in the oven until it's ready. And then after the sheet of metal has been softened, in the case, where we are stamping, the roll sheet will have to be cut into smaller metal sheets. And the size of each individual sheet again is worked out beforehand depending on the size of the design and thickness, etc. And then it's finally ready for stamping or pressing, which is the final step of compression. And we use a variety of stamping machines, from towering machines like the one right here behind me, which is great for the deeper pieces such as lockets, as the front and the back panels of the lockets we produce needs to be slightly domed in order to place the backing sheet, the photo and plastic insets in there. So this machine is used quite a lot. Note that each press from this machine can create 50 plus tons of pressure, which forces the metal sheet into the die press. So it's effectively super compressing the metal, which is exactly what we want in order to get a perfect shape. So a die stamping machine for the deeper presses, such as for the front and the back panels of a locket, would be an appropriate machine to use. But in this room, as you can see, we also have more traditional hand-cranked machines that we use a lot just to make other shape or other stamping components, which the other machines might not be able to achieve. So here we have it, all the various stamped components that's pressed by hand using these machines that we utilize at our manufacturing plant. Each component has to then be carefully quality checked before being handed over to the assembly department, because what good is loose compartments to a customer? So let's say we're referring back to a locket. We have to hand file and hand assemble all the pieces together. The hinge on the side, the panels in the middle, especially let's say if it's a 4-sided locket, the clasp or catch on the outside, the bell at the top, etc. And then after the filing and assembly, the assembled piece then goes into the polishing department, so it doesn't stop there. So hopefully guys, when I say to you that a design has to be stamped or pressed, hopefully you can appreciate what that entails and the steps involved in the process. I mentioned earlier that both casting and stamping methods can have its own advantages, and to be honest, there are lots of people, particularly some of my customers who've been silversmiths for decades, that actually prefer stamping over casting, because they would argue that the overall quality and durability of a stamped die or pressed piece of jewelry is far superior than a casting piece. The image here is of a cast metal examined under an electron microscope. And if you analyze the grain structure, you'll see that it has a distinct resemblance to that of a sponge. And the reason for this sponge-like appearance is that basically the introduction of air into the metal is going in during the casting process. So those air bubbles are all around and in the metal, and it leaves voids between the grain structures and therefore after cooling. But the issue is that over time, the air pockets in the metal weaken the grain structure, and it causes premature wear and is more susceptible to cracking and deformation. So a lot of silversmiths prefer stamping over casting because the durability of that piece just seems to be longer. However, like I said, it depends on the design, and this is why it's really important, that when you're working with a jewelry manufacturer, that you send your initial design collection over to them, allow them to give you feedback on what their process should be and what they feel like is more suitable for that design. And as a designer, feel free to ask them questions. For example, what concerns does the supplier have if they were to follow that process, and what they think they could do differently, to ensure that the piece of jewelry is long lasting for the customer wearing it. So yes, I hope this video gave you a lot more of a deeper insight to our stamping process and the understanding that there are lots of steps involved when it comes to when we get an order from customers which requires stamping. Please continue to keep up with all my videos and like and subscribe to the channel just so then you can get first-hand information on jewelry manufacturing at our manufacturing plant in Thailand. Take care guys, thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye.